Hello, this is Robert Rickover at Alexander Audio, and today my guest is Imogen Ragone, an Alexander Technique teacher and website designer who lives in Wilmington, Delaware. And we're going to talk today about um, the role of organizations in the Alexander world in how they can enhance the visibility of the Alexander technique on the internet. And Imogen is going to be asking the questions today. So I'm going to turn it over to her.
Okay, thanks, Robert. So let's just start. What is the status of the Alexander technique on the web today, and what can be done to improve it?
Well, it's certainly a lot bigger than it was 10 years ago, but it is still, in my view, nowhere near what it potentially could be. The internet in its sort of mature phase has been around now for 15 years or more, and the number of Alexander Technique teachers who even have a website is still well under half of all the teachers, probably about a third. And of that number, a great many of those websites are not, uh, for one reason or another, have defects in them in terms of their usefulness.
Mm.
And we've talked about that on an earlier interview. And also, what's gone on, especially the last, say, 5, 6 years or so, all sorts of sort of add-ons to the web have appeared, like social media, like YouTube, blogging, and so on. And what seems to me has happened that there's kind of a growing digital divide
Mm.
between those Alexander teachers uh, who are making efficient, good use of the web and those who are simply not there at all. And even of those who are making efficient use of the web in the sense that they have a website, it's got all the characteristics it needs to be effective at bringing the teacher students. Um, there are only a handful of students, or teachers rather, who are actually actively using um, all the new things that are going on the web. I would say no more than a couple of dozen.
Mm.
And it's to me the what we need is more students, more teachers rather, getting
We need
started.
more students
We need
too.
more students too, yeah, and that's what. But we need more teachers to take that first step to get a website, or to perhaps redesign one they have now that really cries out for that. And then what I've seen happen is that when a teacher gets a website and they start getting calls and emails and start getting more students, they some of them start thinking, well, if a website can do this, what's the next step I could take? And they might, depending on their inclination, go towards social media. They might go to videos. They might go to audio interviews. They might start blogging. There are all kinds of ways that sort of add-ons to a basic website.
Yes.
But the first step is getting that website, and that's what I think we need more of. We could have at least 3 or 4 times as many effective Alexander websites out there as there are now, and each new website is a benefit not only to the teacher but to everybody else.
Yeah. Why is that of benefit to everyone else?
Well, because it raises the general profile of the Alexander technique. It becomes a larger category on the web. It's there when you have a website and you exchange links with others, it sort of makes that whole, as far as say Google is concerned, looking at the web, it makes the Alexander technique portion of it, as it were, bigger and more
Hmm.
important. And the more websites that are out there that may just happen to have a reference to some other field, Then when someone is searching for something in that field, they may come upon a teacher's site in Australia, and that'll take them to a teacher's site in their hometown in England. I mean, the
Yes.
connectivity of the web is so fluid that any teacher's website, unless it's a really horrible one, any teacher that has a website is benefiting all the other teachers
Yes,
in the world.
I do agree.
Yeah.
But how do you see the difference between the role of what organizations are doing and that of individual teachers in terms of promoting the Alexander Technique on the web?
Well, uh, the
And
web.
or what do you mean by organizations?
Well,
Maybe we
organizations, the two main kinds of organizations of Alexander teachers are professional societies and training courses.
mm,
And both of them, just by their very nature, have to be an organization. There has to be some sort of hierarchy. Uh, Typically a professional society will have a chairman and there'll be committees and so on. And a training course, well, there's got to be a head of training.
mhm.
And that's just a given that needs to happen for an organization to be an organization. But the problem is that organizations, by their very nature, have a hard time interacting with a network where there is absolutely no hierarchy, where nobody is in charge. Absolutely nobody's in charge on
The
the
web,
web.
you mean?
The web, yeah. And I've been thinking about this for a while, but just recently I came upon an interview, an audio interview on Spark, which is a CBC program about technology, by a guy named David Weinberger, who has just written a book called Too Big to Know: Rethinking Knowledge Now That Facts Aren't Facts. Experts are everywhere, and the smartest person in the room is the room. And he talks exactly about this problem. For him, his interest in organizations is more companies, corporations, and how can they make use of the web effectively? And he points to the same kind of issues, that when you have a top-down organization, it's tricky for it to interact effectively with a chaotic network like the web. Much trickier than it is for an individual teacher. And I guess I want to make it really clear also that this isn't a fault of organizations. This is just the nature of
It's
organizations.
just the difference between an
An
organization.
organization and a network, and particularly a huge, really gigantic, ever-growing, ever-expanding network that nobody really can exert much control over. It's chaotic, and yet it is organized.
Organized chaos.
It is organized chaos, and of course, search engines are one of the things that brings a little organization to it. But nobody really runs it.
Mhm.
So my feeling is that all of these all the Alexander organizations, their main role, as far as the web is concerned, their primary role, is to do everything they can to encourage more of their members, or in the case of training courses, their graduates, to get started. Obviously, a website's the first place to go, but encourage them to go into other things as well. And that to me, at this point, given the digital divide that's getting wider and wider now between those relatively few teachers who are doing extremely well with the web and the majority who aren't benefiting at all, I think that's kind of a very, very high priority.
Yeah, but it is important for organizations themselves to have a website, right?
Absolutely. But even a huge organization just has one website,
Yeah.
and it can be a very nice one. It can have ways for teachers to list themselves and so on, and have all kinds of resources. But it's, in the internet world, it's a website. And what's really needed is for an organization to be promote there to be hundreds of additional websites.
So you're saying, you know, teachers who are a member of their professional society would have a listing on their website,
Hmm.
on
Sure,
that website,
absolutely.
and I would say that's very important. I think you're saying, and I would agree with it, that that's not enough as far as the individual teacher is concerned, that they need to have their own website as well, that
It's not
this
enough. It's not enough in
work.
terms of the
Yeah.
individual teacher or in terms of the larger Alexander community.
And I do think, just thinking about it, if I'm looking at a listing of anything, some other, professionals, will gravitate to the ones with websites to click on that link, and then I can find out much more about that particular person or whatever.
Right,
Um,
right.
so I guess that's just confirming your point there.
Right.
Yeah.
If you have a listing, and you should have a listing on your professional society site, but you don't have a website, and you're in a town or city where there are several teachers, the average person going there is going to check out the ones with websites first.
I
And
agree.
not only that, but many people today will just assume that if a person doesn't have a website, they're not actually a professional.
Yeah, I
They
think.
may be sort of, they're a teacher, but they're not really teaching, or that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think unfortunately that's the case now. Yeah.
That is the case. So to get back to what what organizations can do, if we take professional
Yeah,
societies
so what
first.
can professional societies do?
Well,
Or what
let's
have they
talk about
done?
what they
Yeah.
have done. I've been a member at one time or another of four different
Oh,
societies. Yes, impressive, isn't it? Um, and certainly, well, for example, AMSAT, of which I'm a member, has had run conference calls, educational conference calls for its members about the web. They've sponsored workshops at AGMs about the web. You and I have taught some of
hmm
those,
we certainly have.
but other people have as well on all sorts of things. And um, the articles in AMSAT has had articles in its newsletter, and I think ATI has had some, and I believe STAT has as well. Um, so they they definitely have done some of those things, but I would say it's at
Are
a
there
point.
other things they could do, or just more of those types of things? What else?
I think basically, I can't think of. There probably are some other things, but I can't really think of them offhand. But the big thing I think is for there to be a recognition that this is really, really important, and that everybody in the society is going to benefit every time a teacher gets started in this
Hmm.
process. And it's not just the question of a teacher getting started. As I say, once a teacher gets a website, for some teachers, all kinds of new ideas pop into their head when they start
Hmm.
looking around. And we're talking in early 2012. And today, a teacher that I've been in touch with on and off over the last couple of months, Matt Pressman, who's a teacher in Orlando, Florida, who's only been a teacher about 8 or 9 months, started out with a website upon graduation, and quite a nice one too. And within this period, he's got an audio interview, he's got a video, and he's got a giant article in the major newspaper in Orlando that's online, and
Wow.
will probably, and the article included the video. And that article, very likely, typically newspaper articles of that kind get picked up by other papers. There's a lot of repeating of those kinds of things across the country. And he, a teacher of what, 7 or 8, 9 months
Mm.
experience as an Alexander teacher, he has benefited every Alexander teacher in the world.
Yeah.
And
It's impressive.
it's
Yes.
incredibly impressive. And there are other examples of that. It's not the only
Absolutely.
one, but it's a very current one, and that's what we need. That's what will really raise the profile of the technique on the web.
Yeah, that's very seems like a similar thing when was it Joe Gray in San
hmm
Francisco was on NPR.
she did an
Yeah.
interview on NPR, and it went semi-viral.
Hmm.
And well, here is another thing that societies can do. STAT a few years ago was involved in some way. I'm not exactly sure. I think more in vetting teachers, but was definitely involved in the well-known UK back pain study.
Mm.
And of course, now there's not just that study, but there are several follow-up studies. And when that came out, that went viral, and that's a gift that keeps on giving, because that study is constantly trotted out by people in articles and blogs and so on. It just keeps recycling and recycling through the web, and each time it does, there's another little spike in web traffic on the Alexander technique. I mean, that study, which was sort of the product, or partly the product of society, professional society in one country, has helped all teachers everywhere enormously.
Hmm.
Um, so
Yeah.
that's the sort of obviously that's the sort of thing that
So they didn't really do the study, but they sort of supported their teachers
exactly.
to be part of it, and
Well,
I think,
being in England, I think probably my sense is that the original teachers involved, one of whom was the wife of the head researcher, were STAT members. So they
uh-huh.
went out and recruited other STAT members, and
Hmm.
I think STAT played some sort of
Yeah, I
a
think they
role in
did
that,
too.
and I
So
don't know
yeah.
the details. But the thing is that that study, there was, first of all, there's no way that could be kept just an English thing. I mean, the web is totally international, and
Hmm.
so once that came out, everybody benefited from it.
Yeah, and I don't think anyone wanted it to be
No,
just,
not
so
at all.
no, it's perfect. But so you're really saying professional societies can just provide more support and encouragement for their teachers to get out
I
there
think it's
and
mainly a matter of emphasis. I mean, I would
yeah,
say that it's
and maybe
such,
education about
yeah,
it.
there should
Yeah.
be just be more of everything that is currently happening. I think it really needs to be something that needs to be repeated over and over again. I mean, personally, I think every newsletter should have something
Uh-huh.
about the web, and there should be conference calls or whatever kind of group learning things about the web pretty much every week. I just think it's something that is just it's really, really important for our profession, especially
Well, we don't
give
want to get left behind, I don't
we
think.
don't want to get left behind. And a lot of teachers are not teaching as much as they'd like, and I think it's fair to say that these days the web really is the major entry point to the technique,
Yeah.
more than any other medium out there. Obviously, if there was a TV special uh, on the Alexander technique, that would do wonders. But
Yeah, but
just to
guess
take
what? It would be on
Joe
the web.
Gray's example of an NPR interview, um, that was on a local. Well, actually, that was on, and was I'm not sure whether it was
Was
on
it? No, it
NPR
was
in
not. It was
general.
national. Yes, it was
It was
national.
national, but I would venture to say that its main effect was sort of the aftermarket
Yeah.
on the web.
I didn't hear it live. I heard it
Yeah,
live.
because once it was on the web, then it got copied and recycled, and it keeps getting recycled because it was a good interview. It was very short and very listenable.
So that's sort of where you think professional societies can go. What can training courses do, or what have they done?
Well, some training courses have really excellent websites of their own. And a couple of good examples would be ATI LA, the one in Los Angeles, and the Alexander Technique Training School in London. Has a really good course, has a really good website, and there are some others. So certainly leading by example, and I think if you're running a training course, you obviously want your students to be successful because it's from your students that you're probably going to get some more people on your course. And I would think it would be highly desirable to ensure that every teacher who has the remotest desire to have one have a website up and running at least by graduation, probably better a year or two earlier, so that it can get indexed by Google and so on, so that once he or she transitions from being a trainee to a teacher, all they have to do is change some wording on the site, and the site's already been up for a year. It's got its placement on Google. It's got ranking on Google. As far as I know, the only course that really does that in an aggressive way is Richard Brennan's course in Ireland. There may well be others. I don't know, but I would think again that would be be good for that to be a really high priority. Now, a lot of younger people who are on training courses, you don't really have to twist their arm because they already know about it. And some of them have already, have put up websites even in their first year because they just get it, that it's important. But there are a lot of people who are drawn to the technique who are not techies. And I think the key is to make it really easy for them to do it. I mean, you don't really have to know any techie stuff to get a website, but you have to have someone to guide you a little bit, probably, to do it effectively. So that's really my main point, that I think the people who are on the boards of professional societies, I got to say, from everything I see, it is hard work. There's a lot of burnout. I keep running into people who were on boards at one time or another, and they're exhausted by it. It's a lot of work, and I have nothing but respect for people who take on that responsibility, but I think generally their role would be best served by kind of outsourcing to their members the actual dynamic web stuff, getting websites. Now, it doesn't mean, for example, we're talking about examples. AMSAT, I believe, is hopefully going to be producing an animated video on the Alexander Technique. And that, if it's good, that could benefit everybody tremendously.
No, it sounds like a great project.
That strikes me as an excellent project. But the actual getting of it out there once it's produced, that's going to be up to individual teachers. And that's where it comes back to encouraging more and more people to have a platform and have ways to sort of
so to have the website, but maybe also, if you're interested, be on social media so you can post that video or article.
If it's
and that's so current. That's,
absolutely. If it turns out, which I hope it does, if it's an effective, good, short video, and it's up on YouTube where everyone can see it, which would certainly be the ideal. That's something that could very easily go viral. But it'll only go viral if there are enough people to make it go viral. It can't, on the web, the biggest corporation in the world is just a website. It's not
So
Uh,
what you're actually saying is that for the societies or the training courses to promote the Alexander technique, it actually needs to be an indirect approach in that it has to be their members that do it.
I think so. I
I
think
mean,
it.
not all of it, but the
I think the
majority.
majority of it, the key component is individual members who will be able to propagate any useful output that you do. So with STAT, the main propagation mechanism was teachers who,
Yes.
yeah, and
Teachers
same
all
thing,
over the world. Yes.
yeah, and also the more teachers you have who get involved, some of them are going to take the next step and the next step depending on their interests. Some may turn to blogging, some may turn to video, some may do audio interviews, some certainly will do social media like Facebook and Twitter, and every time someone takes an additional step, it's almost certainly going to help every other teacher in the world.
Yeah, I think you're pe- the more well, the more anyone, it doesn't have to be teachers, but the more teachers who are actively promoting the technique and not even necessarily their own practice, but just promoting, putting out their articles and videos,
Hmm.
it helps absolutely everyone.
It is.
There's
It's
just more presence for us that will be found more quickly. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's the interconnectivity and the instantaneousness of that interconnectivity that leads to all kinds of intriguing connections that get made. People find it. I just interviewed a doctor in Detroit who found a teacher because a relative of hers, uh, wife, I think, knew something of the Alexander technique in England and found her a teacher
Hmm.
in Detroit. And it would never have happened if it weren't for the web. It's that interconnected
Yeah.
ness that leads to all kinds of weird connections, being unexpected connections. When I ask people how they find me, sometimes it's the most amazingly indirect way. They
Yes.
don't
It's
just find me, they find somebody who has mentioned the technique in some article somewhere and they say, "Oh, I wonder what that is." And then yeah,
Mhm.
it's that process
Yeah.
that really dominates the web. It is totally um, a bottom up structure, if you like.
Yes. Yes. It
And
is. Or it's certainly there's no greater everyone's equal in terms of the organization has no more influence than the teacher or the student or the
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and I used to be an economist, and we used to talk about barriers to entry. The barriers to entry, the financial barriers to entry, that is the cost of getting involved on the website, is absolutely minimal.
Mm-hmm.
It is to me,
There are free ways you can do
there
it,
are free ways, but
and
really,
then
I
there's very
think
low cost
it's
ways.
very
Yeah.
low cost, and I would say, essentially free. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it costs you a little something to get a website, but all of the structure of the web is there for you for free.
Mm-hmm.
You don't pay
Exactly.
for the web. You pay have someone design a website for you, and which isn't very expensive and or can be very inexpensive. And then these minor costs, sort of technical costs, but they're very small compared to this huge network that you now can do anything you want with.
Mm-hmm.
So
Great.
it was a
Uh,
huge gift to the Alexander technique, the web, and I just wish we'd all use it more and more effectively. And I think organizations, professional societies, and teacher training courses are definitely well positioned to facilitate that. But as you say, it needs to be an indirect approach, just like the
yeah.
Alexander technique.
Perfect. So, on that note, do you have anything else you'd like to
I
add?
think I think we've covered it.
Okay.
So,
I'll
well,
hand back to you, Robert.
my guest and host today has been Imogen Ragone, an Alexander Technique teacher in Wilmington, Delaware, and I'm Robert Rickover, an Alexander Technique teacher in Lincoln, Nebraska, and Toronto, Canada. Imogen, thanks so much for being on the show today.
And thank you for being on the show. Okay, bye bye.